Real women.
Real talk.
Real messy.
This is Messy Midlife.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Messy Midlife. Good morning, ladies.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
So, Aliza, we were chatting while you were gone, and we missed you so much. So happy to have you back. And we were chatting a lot about the impacts of being a highly sensitive person and perimenopause and the overlap. And we got super geeky, and Karen humored me as basically being the person hammering her with 10,000 questions about all of the things that she has expertise on. So I'm sure she is giving a huge sigh of relief that you are back, because we've had a lot of requests for some of our more medical approach and giving some more medical information from some of our listeners. Because I mean, we always tiptoe. We mention things and we like sprinkle the medical stuff in here and there. And so we've been told that it would be really beneficial to have some basics, some fundamentals that we share for the ongoing conversations that we have about things and how they impact us. And I say that I'm sure Karen is glad to have you back, because then I can hammer both of you with questions, because this is not my area of expertise. As I've shared in the very beginning of our podcast, and as you guys well know, that my expertise is in neuroimmune conditions for children, not in all the stuff that's happening in my body right now. And so I've got just as many questions as our listeners do, because it's been 14, 15 years since I've done anything related to hormones when I was in naturopathic medical school. So, you guys good to talk about this today?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Talk about this a lot.
Yes. Yes. We talk about it all the time.
You're going to feel like you guys are having an appointment with one of your patients. So, humor me and, bounce things off of each other. Because the reality is that even if I were to go back and pull one of my books off the shelf that's from, endocrinology, the things that we learn and where the rubber meets the road are just not the
Totally different.
same, right? And so you guys have both the book knowledge and then the lived personal experience and clinical experience that you can really share a lot more detail. So I think if we can even just do the absolute basics to start. So let's just do a hormones 101.
Yeah.
That's plenty to talk about for an episode, because we're not just talking about sex hormones, because a lot of times we separate them out, right? We're like, here's the sex hormones for this, and here's the hormones related to sleep, and here's the hormones related to stress. And we don't talk about how they're all integrated together, but they very much are. And it becomes so apparent how they're integrated together in perimenopause. So who wants to start and where with the absolute basics?
Well, I can share something funny that I used to do a talk with one of the local compounding pharmacies, and the joke we would always start out with was the 7 menopausal dwarfs. And it was itchy, bitchy, sweaty, bloaty, sleepy, forgetful, and psycho. And I feel like I'm all of those things every day. And I think that so many women do too. And Jen, you said something about, being in medical school and what you learned there not really being the reality of what it's like with perimenopause. And I think that's true for us as physicians, but that's also true for us as patients, right? Like everything that I learned, and I was very deeply embedded in women's health in medical school. I was fixed on a women's health shift from year 2, 3, and 4. I was doing a lot of that. And I still didn't have the full picture of what menopause is truly like. Nobody said, "Oh, your mouth is going to feel dry all the time." It was like, "Oh, you're going to have a hot flash," right? Nobody talks about like your ears might itch for absolutely no reason. Like the stuff that is actually even taught in a very patient centric medical school program still doesn't cover everything. And I think that's what we're seeing as patients is it's so much more than we ever could have imagined. And I hear that from my patients all the time too.
Yes. Yes. And even, I'm sure, Aliza, this is the same for you. Every year since graduation, I attend at least one women's health conference. At least one. And even with that, with these amazing naturopathic physicians and functional medicine physicians that focus on women's health, I have had to seek out my own research. I have had to dig into, and part of that is because I work with highly sensitive people. So it's a little bit different of a presentation sometimes. But even then, the data is not clear, it is not in the forefront, and it takes a lot of digging. And I hope that this is validating to our listeners that even for those of us who focus on this, are still finding deficits and we're still finding gaps that need to be filled and explored. Sometimes the data is there, we just have to dig for it. And sometimes it's just missing because the studies haven't been done.
Yeah. Well, so I think and you tell me, Karen, what you think. I think if we're going to talk about hormones, I think we do have to start somewhere, right? We can't say like, let's talk about everything together. So I think maybe today we do talk about the perimenopause, menopause piece and focus on different types of estrogen, like progesterone, testosterone, focus on more of those sex hormones. And those are also the sex hormones that are typically addressed with hormone replacement therapy or bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I think that's really helpful for people to understand, just in terms of what do we need to think about as we're having these symptoms? How do our hormones affect these things we're experiencing? Because it's not always what you feel in your body, right? A lot of women say, God, it's so weird. I never had issues with cholesterol. I never had high cholesterol. But all of a sudden, now my LDL is going up. My HDL, my healthy cholesterol is going down. Well, that's one of the functions of estrogen, right? Estrogen decreases LDL and increases HDL. And so I think that there are symptoms, but there are also other physiological functions that happen.
So let's start with absolute basics.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk about the role of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone pre-menopause? So when we're in our most fertile years, can we talk about how they ebb and flow over the course of our cycle, the role that they play, and then move into how they change during perimenopause?
Okay. Well, so estrogen has hundreds of functions, right? And we still have some of that functioning in perimenopause, but estrogen in general, and our estrogen levels are obviously higher after we go through puberty in our 20s and 30s. And perimenopause, it can start anywhere. It's different for all women. So it can start anywhere from, your mid 30s to your mid 50s. Estrogen has a lot of jobs. Estrogen helps improve insulin sensitivity. So it helps your body regulate insulin and blood sugar in a more functional way. Estrogen regulates our body temperature, our cold and our heat sensitivity. Like I said before, estrogen helps to decrease LDL, our lousy cholesterol, and increase our HDL, our healthy cholesterol. It helps with sleep, helps with sex drive, helps with our brains. It helps maintain memory. It also has a lot to do with our cardiovascular system. We think of, cholesterol as the big thing, but estrogen also helps to maintain elasticity of our arteries. So making sure that they're not getting hard and stuck. It helps with increasing blood flow. It decreases plaque in our arteries. It decreases homocysteine, which is an amino acid that can build up and increase our risk for blood clots. And it's also really important for our skin. It helps to maintain collagen and elastin formation in our skin. So it does about a million different things. It also helps with bone density. A big piece of estrogen in both men and women, but particularly in women, is maintaining bone density. So it has a huge role premenopause. And I think this is why we can see that it's felt so significantly when levels start to decrease in perimenopause. With estrogen, so I think what also gets forgotten about is that there are 3 types of estrogen. So there's estrone, E1, there's estradiol, E2, and there's estriol, E3. So estrone, E1, we don't love it. It's not our favorite form of estrogen. It is a major source of estrogen in women who have gone through perimenopause or in menopause because it is stored in our fat cells. The reason we don't love it is because there are some implications that it increases the risk of breast cancer. So it's not a type of estrogen that we use in hormone replacement therapy at all. I have been told that way back when, before the three of us were born, that it was sometimes used in hormone replacement therapy, but that is obviously no longer the case because of its health risks in terms of breast cancer.
And leading to so much of that bad data, right? The fear
Yeah.
mongering data.
Yeah. But even outside of that, like estrone is, even with new data, estrone is not a healthy estrogen. Estrone it can be a more carcinogenic form of estrogen, and we don't love it. So it's something that we actually try to focus on making sure we are detoxing and moving through. It's never anything that we use in any type of replacement therapy.
And just to be clear, this is a form of estrogen that our body produces naturally.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Well, we won't get technical, but it goes back and forth between estrone and estradiol. Estradiol is a really important estrogen in our body. E2, estradiol, it really carries the weight for most estrogenic functions in our body. So it's important, it's beneficial, and it's very prevalent. So it's what helps control hot flashes and night sweats. It's really important for our cardiovascular health and our cholesterol levels, really important for our bone density, our cognitive function. So it's a big one. And that is typically what is prescribed in conventional hormone replacement therapy. It's just estradiol. I actually really like estriol. So estradiol is super important, but estriol is kind of not to sound like a total geek, estriol is my favorite type of estrogen.
Same. I second that.
It's not a potent form of estrogen, right? But it actually is protective for breast cancer. And so I think that's a really important function of it. Commercial estrogens don't contain estriol, but there are a lot of studies showing that even in pregnancy, women who have higher levels of estriol, particularly in pregnancy, have lower risk of breast cancer after.
Isn't
So
estriol only present naturally when pregnant?
our bodies still can have estriol because, again, it can interconvert. So estradiol can turn into estriol.
So this is an important thing, even for me to really understand, because all of the labs, especially the conventional labs, will
Yeah.
say on it that estriol is only present in pregnancy.
Are you talking about, like, again, the function, like where it says like the different reference ranges?
Mm-hmm.
So it is. So it is primarily made in pregnancy. It's the dominant estrogen during pregnancy more than estradiol, but estradiol can convert to estriol. Estriol is a metabolite of actually both estradiol, both E2 and estrone E. We don't have huge levels of it. So that you're right in that the big time we have it is in pregnancy, but we still have estrone and estradiol converting into estriol, even not during pregnancy.
I have found that E3 is better tolerated in sensitive people. I just wanted to sneak this in because I do love E3, and it is better tolerated because it seems to be much more gentle. And so estradiol can be really building. Estrogen is a building hormone, whereas progesterone is a containing or holding. And so if you have a sensitive body that responds to, these kinds of interventions really intensely, you can have too much building, whereas estriol tends to be much more gentle, and I've seen less side effects with it. So it's something to consider for the sensitive population.
So you're talking about taking it externally, though. What role does it play when it's made naturally in the body?
It still has the functions of other estrogens. It still has the beneficial functions, but it's a much less potent, less powerful estrogen. So Karen, you used different words and I used this, so I was kind of smiling. It's just how we kind of frame it for ourselves and our patient population. I always say estradiol is like a very dominant hormone. And estriol there's not a lot of it, but it has some pretty powerful effects. It's just not this like domineering form of estrogen. We can talk about hormone replacement therapy maybe a little bit later and talk about how estrogens are combined in hormone replacement therapy, or we can kind of get into that now. I think
Let's go through before we do that, because there's, again, this is why the hormones are so complicated, and it made my brain swim even in medical school. And I was just like, thank goodness I know that this is not going to be my area of expertise. It wouldn't have been even if I wanted it to be. So we've got the E1, E2, 3 that are all made in our body and interchange between each other. Where in our cycle, before we hit perimenopause, where in our cycle is estrogen highest?
When we're still menstruating.
Mm-hmm.
So estrogen is highest in the first half of our cycle. So I just, to make it simple, say we've got about a month long, right? So the first 2 weeks, 15 days, we have much more estrogen. It's our much more dominant hormone. We go through ovulation, we have a kind of a peak in estrogen. And then in the second half of our cycle, like those last 2 weeks, estrogen falls. Progesterone's the opposite. So estrogen's kind of higher in the first half. Progesterone is a less dominant hormone, mid-cycle peak, and then we switch and progesterone becomes our more dominant hormone, estrogen becomes less.
And that estrogen can be any mix of those three, but it's
It always is.
mostly E1 and E2.
Mostly, yeah, mostly E2.
Mostly E2.
When you think about the cycle, I mean, think about how most women that I know at some point in our lives, we've taken oral contraceptives, right? And so when you have, your 4 weeks of pills and your first 3 weeks are the hormones and that fourth week is the placebo, that's when you get your period, right? So you think about it is the second half of your cycle, you have that higher progesterone and lower estrogen. And then as progesterone starts falling and estrogen comes back up, but that progesterone fall is when we get our period. So what happens, right? We have that placebo week with no progesterone, no hormones, and we get our period. So it's like that lack of progesterone or that progesterone decreasing is what then initiates our menstrual cycle. It's really interesting too. A lot of people say before they get their period, "Oh, I really don't sleep that well." They're like, "I can tell I'm getting my period because my sleep's not that great for a few nights before." And that's because of that progesterone falling. So if we start talking about progesterone, that is one of the main benefits of it, is really helps with sleep. So progesterone, I always say estrogen is kind of our excitatory hormone. Progesterone is very inhibitory. So progesterone is really important for balancing our mood, our stress, really helps with that irritability. Cardiovascularly, progesterone plays a big role in increasing our HDL, our healthy cholesterol. Progesterone, because of its kind of calming inhibitory effects, can really help when people get those cyclical headaches. Progesterone is really helpful for that. And then when we take it orally, right? So there are different ways that we can take hormones. We can take them in a cream, we can take them in an oral capsule. When we take progesterone orally, not in a cream or a topical form, but orally, it actually helps with sleep. So it's a really nice calming hormone that helps on a lot of different levels. And I think, the bitchy dwarf, I think progesterone really helps with.
I love that you said that it's inhibitory because that's exactly what Karen said when she was talking about
Really?
yes, and she talked about the role and overlap with progesterone and GABA. And then we also talked about the impacts of cortisol on progesterone and all the pathways. So I love that you were not even present for that and you guys still use the same word to talk about it. Karen, was there anything you wanted to add about the specific roles and functions of either estrogen or progesterone in the typical cycle?
As Aliza was talking about all of the fluctuations that happen throughout our cycle, it just reminded me of that graph that shows, what's progesterone doing at this day and what's estrogen doing at this day and FSH and LH and all of these moving parts. And it just reminded me of how special it is to remember that we have at best a 28-day cycle. And I say at best because usually it's a range, right? Between somewhere around 25-ish to 33-ish is considered normal to get your period every amount of time within that range. And so I like to highlight this for women because I found it to be so validating. Men have a renewal of their hormone, of their singular hormone, testosterone, every 24 hours. And so at 8 a.m. every day, most times, men are going to feel about the same every 24 hours. Whereas we have this incredibly complex dance between a ton of hormones, one of which is testosterone, but that one is less variable for us. And so we can't, the fact that we are trying to hammer our star-shaped peg into a round hole as women into this man-made 24-hour day, 24-hour cycle is really not beneficial. It's problematic for us because we need to have more grace in how these hormones shift, and the fact that the range is so broad for every woman and even within the same woman.
Well, and I kind of say jokingly, but it's really not a joke. It's like our hormones change every minute of every day as women, right? And maybe not to that extreme, but yes, there are so many fluctuations. So, and we can talk about that, down the road when we talk about, testing and stuff too. It's like we have to have whatever consistency we can have,
Yeah.
right? So,
I definitely would like to circle back to this actually, to
yeah.
testing, as Eliza's talking about, and also learning that language and having more grace for ourselves in that, because it can drive us individually, kind of nuts, especially with perimenopause when things start to get really unpredictable.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I hear a lot from patients is it comes across as they think it's like this really negative thing that they have different mood swings and mood changes related to their cycle. And I think what I would really like us and whoever can hear this and feel this to understand is that that's also normal as a human being. We are not these totally static beings, right? We are very, very fluid beings. And so it is okay for our moods to go up and down. It is okay for things to shift and change. It does not have to be the same all the time. It does not have to be this flat line. But I think somehow we get into our heads that it's this bad thing and oh my God, and I just get so moody or I get so irritable. And it's like, yeah, welcome to being a human. Like that is part of what we have to deal with. But if for some reason, and I do think, to get this, I do think that's very societal also, is that we're just supposed to be like even keel. We're fine. We don't get irritated. Like we talked about before, we don't get angry. It's like, that's just not being a human. But
So your response to the healthcare wellness influencers and whatnot that say like it's not normal to feel bad around your period. You'd say
who
yes.
normal for who?
Yeah.
I'd say F your normal. Like what does that mean? Like everyone is so different and why does telling somebody that what they feel is not normal, how does that help them?
Mhm.
Like and look, I'm talking in generalities, right? Like I'm not saying extremes. Yes, if people are having any type of like severe stuff where they're having suicidal ideations or things like that, then yes, of course, that is a whole different realm, right? But the ups and downs, yes, your hormones fluctuate. Do you get to control that? I sure don't get to control that in my body. I don't think any of us do. And so the idea that we can do this thing or take this thing and like it's our fault because we're not doing it and that's why we feel the way we do, I think is total and utter bullshit. And I think it places blame on women instead of saying like, look, this is not how I would have created things if I was in charge. I would have built it very differently, but I wasn't put in charge of the human body,
Or maybe
right?
it's not like you were gesturing to your body. Maybe if women were in charge, we would have just changed the way society works
I mean,
and
that's kind
not.
of that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? With this 24-hour cycle. Like that we literally live in a man's world.
Yes.
We literally live in a societal structure that is built on a man's primary hormone regenerating every 24 hours. Meanwhile, we're over here, doing incredible things with our bodies that can create life that require a little flexibility.
Well, and like that is a good segue into testosterone because we always think of testosterone as the male hormone. We think of estrogen as the female hormone, but women have testosterone and men have estrogen because our hormones all convert to each other, right? So for women, testosterone, there is a component of testosterone that really is about, our energy, our motivation, definitely our sex drive, our libido, and in some cases, our ability to have orgasms and climax. And also it helps with being able to build muscle too. So testosterone is important for women too. We're just at very, very, very different levels than men, right? Just like estrogen is really important for men for bone density, but at very, very different levels. So,
Where does testosterone fall in that monthly cycle?
you mean in terms of like shifts and changes? we don't have the same fluctuations with testosterone that we do with estrogen and progesterone. It's much more like even keeled. There are some slight fluctuations, but it's not as cyclically driven, I would say.
Okay.
I do think that there is a little bit of a shift, and I totally agree with you, Aliza, on testosterone around ovulation because of the social element of procreation. So if women have a little bit of an increase around ovulation, there is more motivation, confidence. I'm going to go out there and find the right mate to be my baby daddy, right?
Right.
To
Yes,
find
during ovulation, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, but it isn't huge. It's nowhere near what we see with our other hormones because it's not a driver. The main purpose for testosterone in terms of evolution and procreation is that women find a mate. And so we have to come out of, and this speaks to, and maybe we'll circle back to this when we do more of the testing and all of that, but a book that I read that talks about how important it is to honor each of these phases of our cycle. And when we go into menses, it's really a very hibernation driven stage of the cycle where, in Chinese medicine, it would be a more of a yin versus ovulation is more of a yang. So more feminine, more internal, mystical versus yang being very outwardly expressive, very fire driven, which is more testosterone. So that book, by the way, is called Wild Power. I love it. It's a really wonderful way to connect more with your own cycles and understanding what those seasons are meant to do.
I'm actually glad that you came here naturally, Karen, because I was going to ask you about this because you actually told me about that book. I have not listened to the whole thing. I will be perfectly honest. But I do remember also listening to another book, I think when I was pregnant, called Do Less, that was really focusing in on cycle tracking and planning your life and your activities around your cycle. And you had shared that you are really a huge fan of that. Can you speak a little bit more to that and what you know or what your experience has been with using your cycle for planning your life and leaning into the differences that it presents to you?
I think it's so essential for women's health. I think anyone who works with women should support that person learning their own language of their own hormones and what that looks like for them. Back to your point, Aliza, right? Like, what is normal? Normal is what I experience every single day right now. And maybe I want that to be different because it impacts my quality of life, but this is my normal. And I loved your point about how it becomes a blame game and shaming of women and it's not solution oriented. So understanding what your cycle looks like and how long is your cycle? When do you tend to have ovulation symptoms, whether you choose to do special testing, LH strips or not? You can get a lot of information just from taking notes, just from noticing cervical mucus or noticing mood changes or energy changes in sleep, like Aliza was talking about. And then using that as a blueprint for all of the other branches of health. Because everything stems for a woman who is menstruating, everything stems from that foundation of hormones. I'd love to hear, Aliza, your take on that.
Well, so I mean, I think again, recognizing that we are not all the same, like there are women that do not have a mid-cycle or ovulatory peak in testosterone, right? Even if like it's minimal, like there's some women that don't, that it is flatter. And so again, I think we have to start to move away from the idea that like because it's different, it's wrong. Like we are each made so uniquely and individually, and there is no right or wrong with it. I do think things can be very centered around hormones, but I do not think hormones are the only thing, right? And I think that is where so many people come in saying, like, my hormones are so messed up. Like, I need my hormones regulated. There's something wrong with my hormones. They're one small piece of what's happening in our lives from age 13 to 60, right? Like, they're a constant and there are lots of fluctuations. But I think that things also, a lot of times, the blame gets put on hormones and that there's something wrong and they need to be regulated. And there are so
Mm,
many other things that it could be. Like we
yeah.
were talking about, there are other types of hormones, like our thyroid hormone, right? But there's also, and you apparently you guys were talking about this too, which really sad I wasn't there, like the like GABA progesterone, like our brain chemistry, our neurotransmitters play such a huge role in how we're feeling. And so many people want to come in because they have been told by other doctors, by friends, by family, by society, by social media that their hormones are a problem. They come in kind of blaming themselves and their hormones, but it could be something completely different, like their brain chemistry. And so I think there's so much crossover that it's not safe and it's not effective to say, this is all because of, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, it's just like in anything, like when people want to blame something for a certain type of cancer. Well, no, there is not one singular thing. There's about 20 million things that contribute to that happening. So I just want us and, our patients and our friends and our family and our colleagues to have more of an open mind when it comes to this, because I think it's already like hard enough sometimes, but then you get put into this box of what things are supposed to be like and that you're not in that box. And I think that's really damaging.
Yeah. I really appreciate that perspective. I really appreciate it because how often, oh, she's on the rag. Everything, every possible problem, that is in that relationship, whatever that relationship may be, is because of she's on her period. And so that's more of, the community expression or the environmental expression of what you're describing, but it can be so damaging. And there's so much interplay between hormones and what you were just describing and neurotransmitters and gut health. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so having that baseline, that understanding of your specific baseline by being like, no, I'm nowhere near my period. Screw you. You're the problem. Is empowering.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was telling you guys before we started recording, right? I was feeling like a little bit more emotional over the weekend and like Friday night and Saturday. And literally this morning got my period, which I don't usually get a period, right? Like I'm in perimenopause. It's like all over the place. I'm just thinking about this now. I didn't even think about it when I was telling you guys this, 40 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago. Yeah, that's also probably why I was.
Mhm.
But because I'm not like tuned into that anymore for myself,
Mhm.
that now it just feels like, oh, I'm just crazy and crying and also want to kill somebody while drinking a chocolate milkshake, right? But it doesn't make sense anymore. The pattern doesn't make sense anymore.
Well, so that's actually a really important shift. Before we do that, I just want to circle back around really quickly to fill in the gap for the question that I asked you, Karen, which was about cycle tracking and planning your life around it. Just to make sure that for anybody who's like, finish that loop right now, that what you have shared with me and what I remember reading from these books, I'll be perfectly honest, this is not my thing. Like it requires a level of attending to yourself and consistency that I am just not good at. So I've never actually done it, but I do remember that the recommendation was, at least I believe that was, to plan for things that require a lot of attention and energy in the first half of your cycle, and tending more toward wrapping up details, smaller, slower things that don't require the same amount of fire, if you will, in the second half of your cycle. And then while you are actually menstruating, for that to just be a resting period. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the gist of it.
And one of the 2 books, 'cause like I said, I've listened to some of Wild Power. I did listen to all of Do Less. That one of them recommended that if you're not someone who is menstruating for one reason or another, to follow a just 28-day cycle to see what your patterns happen to look like related to things like the moon and the way it shifts just, um, fluid balance and various different things in our bodies, right?
Yes, and that is my recommendation for women who are not menstruating, but are still having fluctuations in hormones, and that can be because of many reasons that they're not menstruating. Perimenopause, it could be medications, many things impact that. And that doesn't mean that we're not having shifts in hormones. And so what I recommend for that is always find an app that tells you what day of your cycle you're on as soon as you open the app. Anything else, I don't think is as effective. They can have all the bells and whistles, but the one thing that you want to know is as soon as you open it up, what day am I on? I don't want to be digging through this app and with ADHD getting squirreling into, a million other tasks. I want to know what day am I on? And then over time, that's going to start to mean something to you. Oh, okay. Yeah. Day 14, golden. Right.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, right, if you haven't had a cycle in a very long time and you don't know what day you're on, just open it and just start writing things down on the days that you experience something, and you will likely start to see a pattern. And then you can lie to the app and say, okay, I think I'm on my period right now, and it'll start tracking it.
And I will validate that to a degree, although I again, am not a tracker of almost anything. I can track for about 4 days and then it's done. And so as somebody who has not had a period in coming up on 2 years because I've been medically suppressing it because of the endometriosis, I still do notice some fluctuations that I can tell because of the endometriosis. I can tell because of an uptick in pain, but I can also notice, I've for sure texted you guys and said, I feel like I would have been having a period if I was having periods right now, because the one thing that is consistent that I can see is that for about 2 to 3 days every month or so, I hate everything. Everything feels really hard. I want to give up and I want to go live on the moon by myself. Maybe my dog can come with me, but only one of them, because one of them is just too much. And so even if you're not having a cycle, or if you're chemically suppressing it to the degree that I am, with essentially creating chemical menopause, that there still can be some fluctuations that even those of us who are so bad at tracking and paying attention, you can notice the big stuff. And at the very least, give yourself permission to just be like, yep, today I do want to just be left completely alone on the moon, and this will pass within a couple of days.
Yeah,
The
it's huge.
permission, the permission.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we should wrap today, and then on our next conversation, have a discussion about testing and hormone replacement, since that is usually the next follow-on question. But before we do that, we've talked mostly about what the role of hormones are in our bodies and what they're like when we're menstruating. When we get to perimenopause, what the heck happens to these hormones?
They go away.
But they don't go away all at once, right? It's not like
No.
there and gone. It's
Well,
like,
no, and this is the challenge with perimenopause, is that we think it's going to be, again, like theoretically, it's like, oh, it should be this like kind of linear decrease. It is not at all. It's like this, like it's all over the place.
it's like a roller coaster.
I,
Very twisty,
it's like
turning upside down.
17 roller coasters combined, right? Like it's challenging, and it looks different for every single woman, right? It's, technically with perimenopause and menopause, our estrogen and progesterone and testosterone can decrease, and our FSH and LH, our follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, can increase overall, right? But we can have decreases in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and we can have increases in FSH and LH, and then it can go back next time we test, and then it can go the other way, then it can go the other. Like it is not a linear progression in any way, and I think that's the big challenge. For some women, they don't have any symptoms, don't even really notice it. For some women, it's like symptoms are all over the place. So it's super, super different for every person.
Yeah. And I think that this is really I want to wrap today, because I feel like we're about to head into a big conversation that is about all the things with testing and how complicated that can be, and how the unique and individual variances can really make things super complicated when you're trying to get help in perimenopause. So let's pause here and make sure we have plenty of time to have that conversation with a little bit of depth. Sound
Okay.
good?
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. If our messy is your kind of messy, we'd love for you to rate, review, and follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd also love to know what's on your mind. If you were to join us, what would we be talking about? Email us at messymidlifepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram or TikTok.